Hi there. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Hugo Fuentes. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called the Owl Solutions. So we're a Waterloo-based company that do supply chain data analytics for manufacturing companies. Today, I'm super happy because we're joined by Omar. Hi, Omar. How are you doing? Please introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, thank you for having me here today, Hugo. I'm really excited to be having this conversation today. Hi everyone, my name is Omar Ezz. I'm currently a supply chain loss and inventory manager working at Kraft Heinz. Been working in supply chain for just over 3 years. So yeah, really happy to be here and have some insightful conversations.
Thank you very much for joining us. Actually, one of the things that we always mention at the very beginning of this show is to sort of reinforce and remember what's the purpose of why we're here. I mean, and the purpose is essentially because we want to engage with the community, with the supply chain community. We want to make sure that we share some best practices. We talk to people about their day-to-day lives, and engaging with practitioners is part of what we really like, and sort of spreading the word about the work that you guys are doing, that we are doing as well in the industry, and hopefully, get to learn new best practices and try to incorporate some concepts in our day-to-day lives. So that's sort of the idea and the purpose of doing this webinar, this presentation with you too. Okay, so thank you for joining us on being willing to share some of your insights and things that you do on a daily basis. Thank you.
Of course, thank you. Supply chain is super complex, super interesting, so there's lots of awesome conversations to be had. So thank you for organizing.
Yeah, thank you. So tell us a little bit more about your history working in supply chain. So, I mean, how long have you been here in supply chain? What actually drove you to supply chain in particular?
Yeah, for sure. So if I were to take it all the way back, so my educational background is both engineering and business. So I did a dual major, bachelor's in mechanical engineering and an honors in business administration. And I really thought like supply chain would be the perfect place where I can merge both of those worlds together and really apply kind of that logical problem solving approach from engineering and then the business side of things, as well as have some sort of connection to manufacturing while working in business. So that's really what drove me into supply chain. My first taste of it was as an intern. So I was an operations intern at Kraft Heinz. I worked on the logistics execution team and was able to just get a bit of a taste of that world and environment and loved it. So I came back and I've been working full time in supply chain for a little over 3 years now. I actually started out as a supply planner, also for Kraft Heinz. And then a year and 9 months in, I transitioned to a new role, being a manager of inventory and supply chain losses, mainly focused on the supply chain losses, which is really like waste mitigation and obsolescence. But yeah, that's kind of my journey to here today, just over 3 years in the full-time scope.
No, that's amazing, and I think there's a lot of interesting things that you mentioned right there. So the first one is that, and perhaps you can agree with me on this one, but people that works in supply chain are essentially problem solvers, right? So people that is always looking for different ways to do things, finding a solution for the day-to-day problems that we face across the entire supply chain. And that's, I think, being an engineer and a person who is actually also being trained to approach problems from different angles. I think that's super interesting, and I've seen a lot of people that come from with similar background joining supply chain, perhaps because again to this nature of being problem solvers, I guess, right?
There's definitely no shortage of problems to solve, and that's what keeps it interesting, right? There's always something new to work on. It's exciting, it's challenging, keeps you engaged.
Excellent. So let's get started and talk a little bit more about problems, right? Or things that we are here to solve. So I guess the first one that I have for you is tell us a little bit more about the daily life of an inventory manager, how that looks like for you. What are the things that you have to deal with? I mean, what's the structure of your day? What are your priorities? Tell us a little bit more so our audience get informed and get sort of learning about the best practices that you guys are facing on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, for sure. So as an inventory manager, like specifically one focused on supply chain losses or obsolescence and waste prevention, my day consists of like a lot of data analytics. So I'm working with large data sets on a daily basis, weekly basis, and I'm taking that and collaborating with different cross-functional teams, doing financial forecasting, P&L deep dives, and really just monitoring the evolution of our inventory position and our risk on a daily, weekly basis and seeing how that's changing over time. And that's really drives like a lot of conversations and actions for improvement. So some like specific routines would be just meeting weekly with your sales team, meeting weekly with demand, supply, finance, and just diving into the numbers, understanding what's changing, the drivers, and understanding really where we can pull from that and drive insights and action to improve and solve some of those problems that we were talking about earlier.
It's a very cross-functional activity, right? So you mentioned speaking with different people from finance, from sales, from operations. So it's a very cross-functional function, right? So I guess communication is key, right? I mean, communication and
Absolutely.
being able to really pass the right message to different people in the organization is a fundamental part of your day-to-day job, right?
Definitely. I think it's one of my favorite parts too, like being a social person. Like I enjoy working with other teams. You get a bit of a taste of their world. In this role specifically, like I learned so much about how the finance team works, how FP&A works, marketing and sales, all their different routines, and it's all through that collaboration. And there's really a need for it when looking at inventory management because as an inventory manager, you're not necessarily making all the decisions that will impact your inventory position, right? So what impacts inventory, demand, supply, your production capabilities, sales plans. Are they running promos? Is it a high season? All these different things that these different teams work on really impact the inventory position. So it's so important to be well connected with them, having conversations on a regular basis and like understanding what's going on in their world so you can understand how that's going to impact your world and make sure you plan for it.
And that's key, especially in your role. So when you think about inventory, many people think about inventory like a very technical function per se, that it doesn't really involve a lot of communication across the company, but it's the other way around. Actually, inventory management requires a lot of collaboration, a lot of communication across the enterprise, because as you mentioned before, I mean, you are like one responsible party for making sure that those coordination happen, but essentially in order to solve problems associated to the inventory management function, is a cross-functional effort. So you have to count with the support of different people across the organization to hit those goals that the company has in regards to inventory management, right?
Exactly.
Excellent. Now, when you think about and you work for a company that operates on the food manufacturing business, right? Food and distribution business. So what specific things do you guys face, or inventory planners or managers in the food business especially face? Not only speaking
Mhm.
about your company in particular, but in general, based on your experience, what challenges do you think inventory planners in the food business are facing today?
So generally for like the food industry as a whole, there's one unique aspect of it compared to some other industries, right? And that's food is perishable. Shelf lives are short, and that's something that can have a major impact on your inventory. You can't hold inventory for a long amount of time, and you can't hold high levels of inventory because that could lead to obsolescence. So that I think is like one of the major challenges that the food industry as a whole faces is how do you deal with balancing like your working capital investment, your service, and your supply chain losses. Having a lot of inventory will really help you in service, but you're opening yourself up to a lot of risk on the supply chain losses and obsolescence, and also you're tying up a lot of cash in working capital, and vice versa, right? So if you're doing really well in supply chain losses and really low on working capital, you might be missing the opportunity on some sales and revenue there. So it's really a balancing act, and having shorter shelf life perishable items ups the ante. Like it makes it a bit more high stakes when working with that. So I think that's one of the major challenges where we really need to focus and have tighter controls to make up for the fact that you don't have a lot of time to hold on to inventory.
That's a great point. Essentially, what you're saying is that tighter controls, especially in an industry where you have this big component of potential expiration of ingredients, work in progress, or finished goods, is something that is really critical, right? So
Mhm.
strengthening those controls and having the ability to really be on top of what's going on, because of also the velocity of the business, right? So
Yeah,
especially food manufacturing businesses are, when you look at the entire picture of, for instance, one metric, inventory turnover, right? So it's typically, food manufacturing companies, that metric is key, and is high turn, right? That drives, most of the business. But at the same time, as you pointed out, is looking at the balance, right? Because essentially some companies do a put too much focus on one specific area of the supply chain, and then it creates an unbalanced situation, because what you want to actually achieve is a more balanced approach, whether there's a lot of trade-offs that happen between service level, inventory, and cost, and then you're trying to balance all of those things at the same time, which of course makes the function more challenging, right? Because otherwise it could be easier just to take a look at one single angle. But part of the challenge of being in supply chain, and especially on the inventory management part of things, is the balancing act, as you rightly pointed out, and the trade-offs that you have to manage on a constant basis, right?
Yeah, and I think that really drives like to what we spoke about earlier, that communication piece, right? It's making sure that you're communicating that balancing act, because like some teams might have visibility into service, others into working capital and warehousing capacity, right? And it's sharing amongst the teams about the areas that they don't have visibility to, but they influence. So you can make sure that the decisions they're making are helping swing that balance into the right direction.
Excellent. No, I think that's a great insight for anyone, watching this event today, because I think that looking at trade-offs, looking at the balance, and being able to communicate those effectively is so key, right? It's key
Yeah.
today, and it was key before, and it's going to be the same thing moving forward. So the human component of any supply chain communication is key. Now, when you think about, and one of the things that I'm sure that is also part of your day to day very frequently is the use of data, right? So, how you use currently data across your supply chain to understand it better. And this is the way how I put it, because essentially data is an asset that pretty much any organization have. Now, the question is how the organizations are using those assets effectively. So from that perspective, from the data standpoint, so what are the biggest challenges that you see with data in the market today, especially when it comes to leveraging that information for a better purpose in inventory management?
Yeah, for sure. A few challenges come to mind. I think first one, like you said, data is a huge asset, and there's usually a lot of it. Whether or not that data is clean is a different story. So I think one major challenge, like in any industry, really, is making sure that you're able to clean your data or have data being shared in a clean manner that's easy to extract and work with. But beyond that, I think if you go a bit deeper across the industry, when I go to whether it be like events or I talk to friends working in supply chain or even outside of supply chain, really, a common trend I've seen is multiple platforms being used to gather insights and then drive action. So you can see that someone gets information via an Excel workbook or maybe some other platform that the company uses and are pulling data from 2, 3, 4 plus different sites, gathering together in one Excel sheet, and then starting to work to clean it up, make sure the data is compatible, understand and drive insights from it, do calculations, all these different things before you're even able to drive action. So you'll find that people in the industry are just spending a huge amount of time simply building their data sets, building reports, instead of driving change and improvement. And that's a huge challenge, and I think a problem in the industry, because if you're spending 80% of your time building reports, you only have 20% of your time to action. And it should be the opposite, right? You should be able to get insights really quickly, pull data quickly in one platform, and then be able to spend your time working with the cross-functional teams, root causing, sending out actions, and driving improvement. So I think that is really like the biggest challenge that people in food industry and all industries actually are facing these days.
No, I think that's super valuable input for for any practitioner out there. Essentially, what you're saying is that when you think about data is like a raw material, right?
Yeah.
So essentially, you have a raw material there sitting there that first you have to qualify, right? So when you're bringing in the raw material, it goes through a qualification process. So you have to select the right data, where the right data is sitting, in your infrastructure, if it is clean, if it requires some additional manipulation to be assessed and utilized. And then as any raw material, then you incorporate that in your processes, in this case in your data production processes, if you want to call it, right? And then you use that raw material across your entire production, and then essentially what you're looking for is an output, right? Essentially you're looking for hopefully a clean output that in this case is insights that drive your business. So essentially, when you even look at, this is my perspective, when you even look at, and taking your words as well, but when you think about the physical supply chain, which is the physical supply chain, bringing in raw materials, turning those raw materials into finished goods, you may think about the data supply chain similarly, right? So you're bringing raw materials, which is your uncontextualized data, raw data coming from multiple data sources, and then you're processing that data towards creating, the output, the insights that you need in order to drive your business. And the other thing that you mentioned, which is I think is quite interesting, and it's something that in our work with our companies we constantly see, which is people spending 80% in the pre-work. I call it the pre-work, getting things together, aligning information, sourcing the right information, processing, working with multiple platforms or different sources of truth, I could say, right? And then try to create that single view, and perhaps leaving less than 20% of time to really drive actions, right? And that's a challenge because, I mean, it's we got only 24 hours a day, right? I mean, there's a limitation there. So therefore, if 80% of our time is essentially allocated to a function that is collecting information for decision making, then less than 20% devoted to decision making itself is a challenge, right? So I think part of the recipe that you're sharing with our audience is how can you work on some strategic initiatives that would allow you to turn and flip that equation and that proportion over. So spending more time on getting the insights and taking action and driving action internally rather than the first part, which is collecting and manipulating and harmonizing this information. The more you dedicate to the second part and the more you automate the first one, is more convenient for driving change across the organization, right?
For sure. That's how you accelerate growth and improvement, really. And like you said, time is the most scarce resource that we have. So it's like, how can you leverage the small amount of time you have to produce the maximum output and maximum impact? And it's exactly like you're saying, automate the pre-work. Be able to come in and work, just start and drive action, drive improvement, and figure out where your issues lie and what the solutions are for them and implementing those.
Excellent. No, I think that's a great advice, and I 100% agree with you. And I think that's an area where practitioners in the field can really make an impact. So finding ways to automate that first part and then move into action, which is what essentially at the end drives performance, right? Drives better outcomes and better business results for any organization out there. Excellent. That's super
Yeah.
super clear. So, any question for me, Omar, that you would like to ask me? Considering I'm also a supply chain practitioner. I've been in the supply chain industry for more than 20 years, and I worked for different industries like food manufacturing as well. So, any question from your perspective that you would like to ask me?
I guess maybe a little selfishly because I work on the obsolescence side of things. So what have you seen being like some of the biggest challenges that companies are facing when it comes to like obsolescence piece of inventory management? What does work for them to overcome those challenges and improve? And you're saying like it's a great forum to share best practices. So are there any insights you're able to pull from your work experience and time in supply chain?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, I would say that, to put it in a few words, I think is shifting mindset from being reactive to proactive. And let me elaborate a little bit more on that statement. So a lot of companies react to a situation that is at a point that is very, very hard to act and sort of find a way to avoid expiration or write-offs in an organization. So let me give you an example. If you have thousands of different products or materials that you have to manage, and if you multiply those thousand raw materials or finished goods that you have to manage times the number of lots that you have in stock, highly likely you're going to find millions of data combination, data points, right?
Yeah.
Now, if you think about you reacting to a situation, whether your stock is going to be expiring in a week or in 2 weeks from now, highly likely you're going to be very, very late to the point that you're going to be able to make a concrete action, right? And save that material, save that finished good to be expired and get obsolete and therefore become a write-off for your organization. So that's a reactive approach. So actually just waiting for things to hit your door and potentially looking at a very short-term horizon that really doesn't allow you to take action. As you pointed out before, your function is all about collaboration, having clarity around things that are potentially at risk, and then having the ability to communicate those and take action effectively and quickly. So therefore, moving from reactive to proactive. Now, proactive, what it means? Essentially, proactive means number one, expanding your horizon. So you're looking at 4, 5, 6 months out. You're looking at risks. You're looking at the profile of your SKUs and saying, okay, there's a portion of my SKUs and my lots that, based on past consumption, based on forecast, things are trending into a position that highly likely there's higher risk here in this portion of SKUs, and potentially they may become obsolete SKUs in 4, 5, 6 months, even a year from now. Innovation, for instance, sometimes companies are constantly innovating and launching new products, and therefore there's a constant machine that is creating risks of potential obsolescence. So therefore, I think my advice or the best practice that I've seen that is working with a lot of companies is that instead of reacting to short-term risks, companies are looking more proactively to medium long-term risks associated to innovation, associated to discontinuation, associated to new marketing initiatives, and also looking at things like your risk profile. So how many SKUs in your portfolio are not necessarily turning at the velocity that you need? How many ingredients are not being consumed at the velocity that you need? Really paying attention, close attention to those things from a much more proactive perspective than just reacting when things are harder to compensate or actions are not really drive any potential results. So change mindset, reactive to proactive. That's my advice.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Like the more time you have to deal through some risk, the more chance you have of being successful with it, right? And being proactive also allow you to look into like different trends and understand your portfolio as a whole and what is like on a recurring basis driving obsolescence, and then maybe tying those dots and finding solutions to that. So no, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that insight.
Which is one of the things that is quite interesting is that we're definitely talking about food manufacturing, but the interesting part is that, for instance, we have customers in multiple industries that are not necessarily food only. And some people may think that supply chains are very, very different industry to industry, that a oil manufacturing company is super different from a food manufacturing company. But essentially, my answer is that, maybe from a product standpoint, of course, they're different. But when you look at their processes and you look at the way how supply chains operate, I mean, essentially, they're 80, 90% similar. So in any supply chain, you have to plan, you have to source, you have to manufacture, and then you have to ship or do logistics. Now, when you think about an oil manufacturing company, an electronics company, a food manufacturing company, essentially you will find those key components in any of those supply chains. So therefore, coming back to the point of inventory expiration or write-offs, similar. It's the same thing. So they have the same challenge. So they have to make sure that there's a proactive way of having visibility, controls in place, and having the communication tools to allow you to really have a handle into what are the risks, of potential expiration in the future, and as you mentioned before, communicating effectively and being able to track and monitor the performance on a daily basis. I think one of the things that have also changed perspectives or mindsets in people is the frequency of those checkpoints. I mean, historically, some people were okay with checking on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis, what's my exposure, right? I mean, those times I think are way over, right? So now you have to be really on top of what's going on. It's pretty much on a day-to-day thing that you have to really, screen everything, monitor, and then take action. I think that's also a mindset that I personally have seen changing the last couple of years, especially when people really realize that there's some things that need to happen with a much higher frequency that we did before.
Yeah, the speed at which we can get information now has been like growing exponentially, right? So our processes need to change to our cadences and our routines. The more we can check in on things, the more we can catch things that may have come and gone in the middle of that cadence, right? That monthly cadence or however long it might have been.
Yeah, no, that's completely true. So, well, thank you very much, Omar, for your time. I think it's been great speaking with you. All your insights and your willingness to share with our audience your thoughts, your ideas, your experience. So, really appreciate it. I hope you had a good time. And if people want to reach you out, so where can they find you?
First of all, thank you for having me as well. I really enjoyed the conversation, so I really appreciate that. And if people want to reach out to me, I think that LinkedIn is probably the best bet. Just first name, last name, and I'm sure you'll find me that way.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much again to our audience also for watching this episode. And as I mentioned before, our company, Owl Solutions, is a supply chain data analytics company based in Waterloo, Ontario, Canada. So we do a lot of the things that we have discussed today. So helping organizations to increase awareness and clarity around their performance so they can make and take better actions that drive improvements for the business. So for latest news and leadership series, follow the Owl Solutions on LinkedIn or follow our YouTube channel at the Owl Solutions. So thank you very much, guys, and have a great day. Thank you, Omar, again.
Awesome. Thank you.
Take care. Bye bye.